All right, well, we are at a very special time in Doodling with Purpose. We're going to finish the trilateral sounds today with their sound complements. So, fantastic. Big turning point. All right, so speaking of turning points, well, actually, not speaking of turning points, speaking of homework, terrible transition. Here's your homework from last week. So let's transliterate it and translate it. And as always, the first thing we're going to do with transliterating these trilateral sounds is putting all the sound complements, those dots, those dashes, the happy faces, the little house marks. All right. And once we've done that, we can start translating. And the first thing we have is someone in the past did something, IW. And what did they do in the past? Well, they put something. And when you make a past tense of put, it's still put. There's no ed, but you get the point. That little water sign makes it an ed, and under it we have a preposition. A pronoun, which we haven't actually used in a while, and that's the pronoun k for you. Lately, we've been doing a lot of pronouns of she, he, I. We haven't used you that much. Don't forget we as well. That's another one with the water sign with 3 strokes under it. Definitely time to brush up on pronouns. We'll get to that after this lesson, too. All right, so with our pronoun set, what did we put? Well, we put something green. You have a double letter there, or rather a letter with 2 glyphs interloping, and you do the trilateral sound first. And what was green? Well, using our vocabulary words, grain was green. Why not? I mean, grain can be green. Sure, why not? And where was it put? It was put by something, the word in, which is the papyrus shoot with the water sign. And now we have a ideogram of a road, which is pronounced imit. This can be spelled out. The ideogram can be used as a determinative, much like the heart, ib, can also be the same way. You know it's an ideogram because it has a stroke line under it, and you should just look at it for what it physically is. One of those cool tricks about hieroglyphics is when ideograms show up. And the road, where was it going? It was going towards something. The mouth glyph means going towards a object, and this object was the sea, or the great green, as the Egyptians called it. So we have the word green, and then we have the word great, and a determinative for water, making it the great green, what they referred to the Mediterranean as. Hey, because, they couldn't see blue. That's a whole other thing. YouTube it. It's interesting, fascinating stuff. A whole other series. Okay, so let's wrap up our trilateral sounds. And the third to last is the was staff, was, S like soap. So was t. This is the word for a month in ancient Egyptian, like the way you would separate a calendar by, 12 moon cycles, etc. So we don't see that the word was showing up that much. As opposed to the glyph wacham, which is a cow hoof. So you see this showing up a lot in very similar words. So here we have wacham and a determinative. So obviously the extra M is a sound complement or a sound echo effect that we can cross off. This is the word for to repeat, the verb to repeat, like repeating favor, repeating praise. Now, what's really interesting is if you remove the determinative of a papyrus scroll and you sub in the determinative of a man and his occupations, remember that's not the man pointing to his mouth, that's something coming out of the mouth, like speaking. This is a man's job, and when it's a man's job, his hands are out in front of him. And when you substitute this glyph for the same letters, wacham, it means a reporter, which is interesting. It's kind of almost social commentary that a reporter was just someone who repeated something. Interesting. Didn't have their own opinion back then. All right, next we have wacham with a stroke line, remembering that a stroke line makes something what it is, and that's because wachamt is an actual cow hoof. So there you go. What you're drawing is a hoof, and to actually say the word hoof, you're just going to add a T to it. So another one with wacham in the middle. We have wacham, and then the papyrus, and then either an A, or this can also be actually drawn with the sword holding it, which I'll add in a moment. All right, now before we get into the pronunciation of all this, I want to actually draw your attention to this particular glyph because it demonstrates another very important aspect that we haven't touched on too much, and that's the rectangle and square aspect. I've talked about the whole concept of making sure everything that was written looked pretty. And you'll notice that in some glyphs where it does not make a perfect square or a perfect rectangle, you can tell something is off. So, for example, when we talked about the word for month, I wrote it as was ty. That's because this was actually taken from a spelling version of it going down, going vertical. Because when it goes vertical, you can see it's a perfect rectangle. When it's written in a square like this, it's not. So they'll find other letters to add or subtract or more determinatives in order to make the word stretch out or compress into a square or a rectangle. It was how they kept everything neat. So this is the word for again, wachama, again. It works as a perfect rectangle, and you can see how placing the determinative there does that. All right, the last trilateral sound. Huge. Celebrate time. So this is Wasser. Remembering the S with the dash over it is S like soap, like Scott or snake or soap. What you're drawing is this. This is one of the sort of more well-known in pop culture staves that are held by people in power, a was scepter. So actually pronounced was. And this is it means power is what this is. What you're drawing is, well, the neck of a jackal, which is what it is literally. Wasser with a T, with a stroke line, is going to make it the word for neck, because that's what you're actually drawing. But this staff always means power. So if you have just the Wasser staff next to a man and his occupations, well, we know that his occupation is power. Therefore, this is the word powerful man. It's literally taking the word power, the Wasser staff, and putting it next to a determinative of a man and his occupations. You literally create a word that way. You have powerful man. You could put a woman or a pharaoh there instead. Now here we just have the word Wasser spelled out. W-S-A, I'm sorry, W-S-R, the mouth sign, and then that A at the bottom, that's the one that should have the extra sword. I'll add that in a second, because it's a determinative, not the letter A. But again, you see how the use of a determinative there at the end makes a perfect rectangle. And we're going to read this following our rules of first into the faces, so left to right, and then up and down. So that makes the determinative last. So I added the sword. I forgot to put it on those previous two slides. So it's not the letter A, it's a determinative of a hand holding a sword. And that's literally the word power. So we have our echo effect in the middle with an extra S with the bolt of cloth, not needed because Wasser takes care of the bolt of cloth and the open mouth sound. So our trilateral sound works out. All right, your last trilateral homework, here it is. So glyph it, translate it, transliterate it, and we'll be back next week to go over it for the last time, because now that we're done with the trilateral sounds, we're going to move back into structure and verb tense, which I'm excited for because we've been through the glyphs twice now, which is the way you want to do it, and now we're going to go through structure again, which is also the way you want to learn an ancient language. All right, thank you so much for being part of the class, and I'll see you guys next week. More doodling with purpose.